Good morning and welcome to the Eclectic Radical. As always, I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. My co-host today is Youri Smouter of the 1+1 program. And our guest today is tenant activist from New York City and longtime correspondent on social media, Antonia Marrero. How are you doing today, Tony?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here on the verge of World War III. I couldn't think of a better group of people to be with than the two of you. So thanks for inviting me.
What better time to complain about the rent being too damn high than when the world is about to end, right?
For sure. Let's just extract the last bit of foods out of our sustenance just as we're sailing into the oblivion. Let's make sure that the pockets of our landlords are lined.
When we were, Youri, you had just asked a question from Tony when we got started, but before we were on the air. Go ahead and ask again.
Yeah. So obviously you're from the Big Apple, but where in New York are you based? Like, is it the Bronx, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Manhattan?
Right. Well, I was born in Queens. And my husband was born in Brooklyn. And I was born into a family that loved the Yankees, the baseball, but I married a Mets fan. So, just sort of comes around and, I you have to convert. There's no mixed marriage here. I went Mets all the way. And now we're in Brooklyn. And we've been living in a rent stabilized unit for the past over 20 years. And we're just at that line between East Flatbush and Brownsville. So technically, Brownsville starts across the parkway, right? But on our side, technically, it's East Flatbush, but everybody around here calls it Brownsville.
Well, that's fascinating, and I hope next time I go to New York, it's actually it's funny. All of my years living in California, never went to Los Angeles, never went to like Arizona, never went to Mississippi, never went to Chicago, never even went to New York, and then like several years later, my sister organizes a trip, and then we finally went to New York and went to Manhattan, and I wanted so badly to go to Brooklyn, and I think we even spent like a little bit of time there, and hey, I have to go back.
Yeah.
I'm trying to visit New York. So
the bad news is that Brooklyn isn't so much like the movies. More, it's been gentrified a lot.
But Chris, what place hasn't been gentrified? Gentrification.
The worst news is that the baseball team went to Los Angeles a long time ago.
That's true.
Well, and I was shocked, because when I was living in California, of course, my baseball team was the San Francisco Giants. But when it came to like American football, I never supported the San Francisco 49ers. I was obsessed with the LA Raiders because of the cool logo. And now that football team is no longer an LA team. It's Las Vegas.
As a Dodgers fan, I've got to say, I mean, we can't get married if you're a Giants fan, man.
No mixed marriages here.
No mixed marriages in California either, though. Neither one of us is in California anymore.
You want? I'll give you a mixed marriage. I'm biracial. My father is a white Dutch atheist. My mother is a devout Congolese Catholic. Congo Zaire. I refuse to call it the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's still as a banana republic as it ever was. And she came from an affluent. Background, and my father came from the post World War II working class generation. And I won't say who she was supposed to have her arranged marriage to, but the very prominent politician who she said was very charming, was saying, I really hope you don't consider going out with the poor white man.
Wow. So your mom was a real rebel. is a real rebel.
You know she was, and she was in that respect, and I wouldn't call her a leftist, but she definitely is, like left leaning, and she would have loved Bernie, getting the nomination, but for her, like the Republican Party is the Antichrist on the steroids, and
well, I mean that part is true.
But here's the thing. She loves monarchs. Like she went to like a one of those like rich like Catholic schools where she rubbed shoulders.
Wait,
with,
I got to stop you. Someone from Congo Zaire, loves monarchs.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
people from the Congo shouldn't love monarchs. There's a rule.
Exactly.
At least not Western monarchs.
So you see the contradictions here, right? You do get the contradictions here, and she loves, and
she doesn't love the Belgian royal family, does she?
She doesn't, but she loves.
That's good.
But me and my sister, we were born in France, and my mom loves all things France, including like my father, and she's the type of person who would have voted for Chirac, de Gaulle and stuff like that, and hates Mitterrand, and she hates the Socialist Party in France. But in the U.S., she would vote Democrat, and would preferably a Jesse Jackson, Ralph Nader, or Bernie Sanders. But we still get into nasty arguments about Obama, and it still pisses me off that I have to always from the beginning explain to her why he was a boring, uninspiring centrist windbag, a war criminal at large, and so forth.
He's looking awfully forward-thinking right now about Iran and Cuba. That's all I'm going to say on that topic.
I often reflect on my appreciation of him, which has diminished over the years, but still, I still retain an appreciation for his ability to harness spirit. He was just is such a great orator, and it's just a real shame that he couldn't be more bold. I feel like if he had been bitten by the right mosquito, or if he had been, do you know what I'm saying? Like if he had just a slightly different tilt, and I honestly think that Biden was a tremendous hamper on him. I should probably take this hat off when I'm talking about politics, because this is a nonprofit organization that I'm aligned with that helps me organize tennis. We're not supposed to be partisan, but I'm going to take this hat off for a moment to talk about Obama and Biden, because I do think that choosing Biden as a vice president is precisely what fenced in his ambitions for universal health care. Because Biden, coming from that Delaware background, Chris and I have discussed this many times, that Biden is the handmaiden of oligarchs. All this upward wealth legislation comes out of Delaware. He gaslit Anita Hill, which set back two by decades. And Clarence Thomas's wife funded January 6th. I mean, to step back and look at the big puzzle, I really understand why people say, oh, I don't believe this, but I can understand why people say there's no difference between the two parties. But yeah, I'm really curious as to, so does your mother have a crush on Obama?
Oh yeah, definitely. And for her, Oprah, of course, is
oh my God.
So have we? I'm gonna.
Let me just say the following about Obama. I was never impressed with Obama. I always thought he was a boring, uninspiring centrist windbag, and I never understood why so many leftists, and I'm talking about the best of the left, were all propping up Obama. I was a supporter of Dennis Kucinich and Mike Gravel, and then before I really became a flaming left winger, I was very supportive of Ron Paul's Ron Paul's bid for the anti-imperialism and so forth. And then Obama. So I was never impressed with Obama, but then when he got the nomination and made his speech at the DNC, all of a sudden everything vague about his positions, he was very clear, and I thought, okay, he actually is going to take on the oligarchs, and he's going to cut back, militarism and so forth. I didn't expect him to be so weak. I didn't expect him to be such a centrist, and I did not expect him to be such an asshole when it came to fucking foreign policy and going after like Chelsea Manning
Biden,
and whistleblowers and so forth.
I'm gonna stop you here and bring up Biden again, because Biden, you have to understand that Biden was the chair, was in addition to being on that famous Judiciary Committee chair, Biden was also the longtime chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. And Biden was tremendously involved in getting us into the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, was complicit with Nancy Pelosi and George W. Bush about lying about the fact that they already knew there were no weapons of mass destruction, and was basically in bed with the Republicans, as many Democrats were, for everything leading up to the Iraq war.
And taking this and also taking this back to New York, Obama's Secretary of State was Hillary Clinton, former senator of New York, who sometimes like when you hear Hillary Clinton, for example, talk about just on the topic of Israel alone, Hillary Clinton's even more right wing than Bill Clinton, and you cannot get more right wing than Slick Willie Bill Clinton.
Not on Israel, anyway.
or Haiti,
but that note, I want to take us back to New York and talk about tenant organizing, which was our original intention, and it's only been 12 minutes, so that's not too far a rabbit hole. And who doesn't want to bitch about World War III, right, folks?
I'm telling you. I do think that the hope for communities like mine boils down to mutual aid.
Yes.
And I think that as far as being an organizer, the accomplishments that I'm actually most proud of are the mutual aid networks that are blossoming in our hyperlocal tenant union. We're starting here in our building and the building next door, which is owned by the same portfolio landlord who's well on his way to being a billionaire if he's not already. He owns about 80 buildings, and from the Bronx to mostly in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. I had organized here when he first purchased the building back in 2006. And I have to say that I worked really hard, and so did my neighbors, but we did not have a firm enough grasp on the bureaucracy that hems in tenant rights here in New York. There are so many or agencies and sub-agencies that need to be navigated effectively for any kind of change. And thank God for HOPE, Housing Organizers for People's Empowerment. Back on September 25th, 2024, I got a knock on my door, and I met a woman named Amy Bolton, who is a professional organizer with HOPE, and she was assigned to our building, and she really resurrected my fighting spirit. Now, we've had building-wide rent reduction next door through a state agency called DHCR. We've had a building-wide rent reduction in our building through DHCR, and this was largely thanks to Amy's efforts, getting people on board. I myself had attempted that same maneuver way back in 2008 and failed because I didn't understand the bureaucracy. I had a much clearer picture of what was happening in our building, I had 68 out of 71 units participating in our ongoing surveys. So I had a very clear picture of what the state of disrepair was in our building. And I'm not nearly so organized this time, even though we've been more effective. And it's because they know which levers to pull. You know, my time now is divided between taking care of my mom, keeping her out of a old age home, keeping her aging safely in place, which takes up a lot of my time, and the organizing of my neighbors. But what I find what really gives dividends is getting people together to help each other. For instance, got a wonderful neighbor on the 5th floor. Shout out to Monty. He's got the most gorgeous apartment. I mean, really beautiful, like right out of a magazine. And there's another neighbor next door. He's an Army vet, and he's had some trouble with PTSD and with, trying to get his place homey. He's dealing with some clutter, and his caseworker has been bullying him, saying, if you don't clear up this clutter, they're going to evict you. That's just the tip of the iceberg about the misbehavior, the negligence of certain caseworkers who are assigned to neighbors in this building and next door. We have a lot of neighbors who are in social programs, and that's also a big part of my efforts, is to help people understand that they have rights. Even if they have to answer to their caseworker and the landlord, they still have rights. So what's really helped is to get oh, we got a comment here from my friend Adam. Hey Adam, how you doing, man? Yeah, so like the thing is that for instance, Monty is so good at putting things together. So I asked him, I called him on the phone, and I'm like, Monty, we've got a neighbor next door, and he's having some trouble decluttering. And without skipping a beat, Monty was like, sure, I'll step in, I'll do that. And he was so enthusiastic about it. And what I've discovered is finding people who have an overflow of talent and connecting them with somebody who just needs a little help. And so we've got some neighbors who, are really good at cooking, and they're cooking for neighbors who are sick, so we're trying to grow that. And we're doing that partly also through our website. We got our first neighbor to put out his little testimony about what he's dealing with in his apartment. And this individual, my goodness gracious, he speaks 5 languages, autodidact, right? 5 languages. In his past life, he used to be a beta tester. And how does he fill his time? Public service. When he's not working, he's volunteering at the local church distributing food. And every neighbor in this building next door knows that if they're having computer trouble, all they got to do, hey, Sophia, it's Monifa there. All they got to do is knock on his door or give him a call, and he'll show up to help them with whatever computer issues they've got. We had this meeting about 6 months ago next door, because we alternate having meetings in our building and next door in the lobby. And so as we were closing our meeting, somebody apparently had made a noise complaint, and about 5 or 6, was it 5 or 6 NYPD officers entered the lobby. And, it was just kind of like jarring, but the oldest, most seasoned officer was like, hey, Andre. He knew the neighbor. He knew my neighbor, Andre, the gentleman who speaks 5 languages, who's always volunteering. So here's my advice for any organizer. If you're organizing your neighbors against a landlord who's litigious, be sure you get the pillar of the local church community to join the effort, because that's gonna really smooth things over with NYPD.
I gotta ask Chris if permission to ask a question.
Go for it.
Okay, so I have a history question to ask you, and then some current events. So now, for our international audiences, everybody should know that New York the first settler colonialists were the Dutch, and then the Brits, stole. Just like in South Africa, the Brits came and stole the Dutch, the Dutch settler colonial project, and then of course New York becomes part of the great manifest destiny of settler colonialism in the United States. And of course, with slavery and so forth, when you fast forward it, New York has always been a place of very big extremes. I mean, many people who are Marxist students, I think they would love studying the history of New York and how communities like the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens and so forth all get founded. Now, inequality when it comes to inequality in New York and issues like the housing crisis. Does it start with the fact that while the New Deal did a lot of good, it didn't do enough in terms of radically transforming the economic system of the United States, like nationalizing a lot of the big banks and stuff like that to make sure that you can distribute the wealth equally, and then of course social mobility has all stopped with the rise of Reagan and stuff like that. That explains why there is a lot of homelessness in New York, why there's such grotesque inequality, because of New York is also with Wall Street and so forth. So is that where a lot of the housing crisis is that the root of why there is such a housing crisis, and people constantly, if they can't afford a mortgage or so forth, they're constantly fighting with landlords about the rents being too damn high and whatnot.
That's such a huge that's a huge vista, and I'd like to just wax philosophical and say that I honestly believe that paying rent is an artifact of manifest destiny. And I believe our manifest destiny was in great part derived from the doctrine of discovery, which was a papal bull written by Pope, what was his name? I have the name somewhere, but it was written in the it was written in the mid 1400s before Columbus sailed. And the doctrine of discovery, to review in overall, pretty much says if you land on people who aren't Christian, you're entitled to take their land and enslave them. That's basically the bottom line, right? So
Pope Alexander VI had the original bull, and the modified version that was in the final treaty was Julius II.
Wow.
So those are the Renaissance popes who were going to war with all their neighbors.
1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the statement Dum Diversas, which authorized King Alfonso V of Portugal to, quote, subjugate the Saracens and pagans and any believers and enemy of Christ, to take their belongings and land, reduce their persons to perpetual servitude. And then in 1455, the same Pope, Nicholas V, issued Romanus Pontifex, which extended Portugal's authority to conquer lands of infidels and pagans for the salvation of all, including Africa, which justified the Atlantic slave trade, the Middle Passage, chattel slavery. So, I like to say that the doctrine of discovery is what justified manifest destiny, and manifest destiny justified the Monroe Doctrine, and the Monroe Doctrine inspired Zionism. And what's interesting is that Pope Francis, just before he died, he apologized for the doctrine of discovery, and he was standing with Palestinians. Speaking as a person whose father was born in Puerto Rico and somebody who believes in Puerto Rican independence, I believe that
you're here.
So I believe that I think we're going to look back at the landlord-tenant relationship as a barbaric, if humanity survives, we're going to look back on it as a barbaric artifact of white supremacism. And I think that the woman who was appointed to the mayor's office of tenant rights, Sia Weaver got in trouble for saying as much. They went through her tweets, and she said, I think that the problem in New York City boils down to white supremacism. And, they tried to nail her to the cross for that. But Mom Donnie said, I didn't hire her for her tweets. I hired her for what she accomplished, So I think she's doing a great job so far.
It's not like she's wrong. I mean, between capitalism and white supremacy, that covers most of the landlord problem right there.
But, Mom Donnie did have to apologize for saying that the police were institutionally racist and sexist and queerphobic.
Well, I mean, did he have to, or did he choose to?
I'm gonna also point to the first time I ever saw Nicole Hannah Jones. She was in a documentary called A Matter of Place, which is still available on Vimeo and YouTube, and it was produced by the Fair Housing Justice Center. And what they do is they send actors out applying for apartments, and they'll send out people with identical or close to identical financials portfolios. But one person will be disabled and another person won't be, or one person will be black and the other person will be white, or what have you. And they found housing discrimination in every single zip code in all 5 boroughs.
Of course. And that's it's fundamental to the way that New York is actually built to keep everybody in their own part of the city originally. The way that parks and highways and bridges were designed to maximize easy transportation for white folks in the most accessible parts of Manhattan and make it hard for everyone else.
That's fast, but so I mean. When you think of a place like London, and when you think of or if you think of a place like London or just England in general, it's always been a place, a society of haves and have-nots, and then a little bit of everybody, like in between. And New York kind of reminds me a lot of that. Like sometimes, when me and Chris, when we've talked about the Victorian period and the grotesque class system in England, I sometimes think of the new Jim Crow and the Clinton crime bill, broken windows theory of
super predators.
And for me, like, I hate the term neoliberalism. I think we should call it neo-Keynesianism. Because the classism is just so baked into the ideology that if you're unemployed, if you're having a hard time finding a job, or if your job just doesn't pay doesn't pay you a livable wage, and then you're evicted, that is classism. That is institutional classism. That is the capitalist system, and so forth. And and New York, and not just New York, but Chicago, even where I grew up, California. All very similar to each other. And these are supposed to be like, the blue states, the progressive states on top of that.
There's just as much redlining in blue states as there are in red.
New York is a famously blue state and city.
Well, and then like the city of London. I mean, like London. One of the reasons why England is the 5th largest economy in the world is because of all the tax dodging and all the neocolonialism they do, but also it's the center of finance. And New York, I mean, New York is just like California in that, like, you have like all this like pop culture, which is sometimes left-leaning and so forth, but you have all these institutions which are just like the most like grotesque basket of deplorables. New York with the banking, New York with the real estate industry and the banking industry, California with Silicon Valley, Hollywood and its ties to the deep state, and then big oil and whatnot.
Well,
or even big ag and so forth.
And of course, as we have witnessed through the career of Donald Trump, the New York real estate and finance industries are deeply in bed with Washington. And when we talk about the machine in New York, people really don't understand sometimes how long the machine has been there. Mm-hmm. In 1858, a man named Fernando Wood was elected mayor of New York as a Democrat just before the Civil War on what would essentially be called a pro-Confederate background, a pro-Confederate platform. And during the Civil War, the ruling class of New York City was relentlessly and endlessly pro-Confederate. And the Democratic machine in New York City specifically went out of their way to astroturf anti-draft riots among the New York immigrant population to oppose the Civil War.
Yeah.
That's how old the machine is, like before the Civil War. And it's the same machine. Tammany Hall. I mean,
the World Trade Center, which was the location of the auction of people.
Yeah.
The
World Trade.
Yes.
Well, and then New York is also a perfect example of how, you know, there's not that much different between the Democrats and Republicans. You have the Democrats that are basically a center-right party, and then the Republicans are ultra-libertarian party. I mean, that's
New York.
And then you have mayors like Ed Koch, who very friendly with the slumlords and the landlords, and then after him comes a black a black mayor who was not very anti-cop or anything like that. Then
I say this,
and then of course the reign of terror, which was Rudy Giuliani and his neo-Dickensianism and broken windows theory.
I say this with deep sadness, but you have to go all the way back to why can't I remember his name right now? Fiorello LaGuardia. You have to go all the way back to Fiorello LaGuardia to find any sort of halfway genuinely progressive mayor of New York. And if you even want a respectably liberal mayor of New York, you have to go all the way back to John Lindsay, who was a Republican. Ed Koch was essentially a conservative. He ran homophobic campaign ads against an opponent once. Let's see. And then, of course, he was the target of a homophobic campaign ad himself, too. So it's hilarious. And then,
what's funny is the very popular the late muckraker of the Village Voice, Wayne Barrett's the first guy to kind of dig into dodgy Donald Trump and how he's not a self-made millionaire, he's a subsidized millionaire. He his book, it's very hard to read, but he did a whole book on like the Ed Koch years, and the hero in that book, City for Sale, was yours truly, Rudy Giuliani, and then Barrett wrote like the best investigative biographies and whatnot of Giuliani and how much of a just grotesque, like neo-fascist that guy was.
Yeah, but getting back to your point, Youri, about how many unhoused people we have in this city, it is not for lack of apartments. No. We have many, many homes that are vacant. And I'd like to point out that, you were also speaking of subsidies just now, Youri. Our landlord here gets loans from the Community Preservation Board, which is right under the FDIC. And presumably he is supposed to be using these monies to refurbish this building because a great number of the people who live here are with social programs. He has sort of pushed out people who've been here a long time, and some of them have just left because of deteriorating conditions, and rents out at market rate to nonprofits. Now, he's allowed to do this because as a rent stabilized unit, if he were to rent to a private, to an individual, he would have to stay within the rent guidelines board. And we would always encourage new neighbors to go to downtown and get their rent history to make sure that they weren't being overcharged. Because another aspect that's really cutthroat here in New York is that if a rent regulated unit is overcharged and the tenant doesn't challenge it, then after 3 years, the unit becomes deregulated and can go for market rate. So what he's doing right now is he is allowed to charge whatever he wants to nonprofit social programs, right? And to my knowledge, there's about 3 that he deals with in this building and next door. There might be more, but there's 3 that I know of. And when there is an issue with a tenant, I'm going to give you an example. I had a tenant, a neighbor who lived 2 doors down. She was quite a personality, and her caseworker neglected her. And on Juneteenth of 2024, I called 911, and NYPD found her remains, which had been rotting there for days, possibly weeks, but probably not weeks, but certainly days. And her apartment was left as is for many, many months. And it wasn't until April of the following year that they opened her apartment, cleaned out her belongings, and on the 15th of April of last year, they brought in a new neighbor. But here's the thing. Throughout all that time, the landlord is collecting rent, unregulated market rate rent from that nonprofit. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then when the neighbor moved in, this young man who moved into that unit, it was in terrific disrepair, and he lived without electricity or a working kitchen for about 2 months. I mean, he did have electricity in the bedroom, but no electricity in the foyer, no electricity in the kitchen, no electricity in the living room. Okay.
Kitchen and the living room sound like important places to have electricity in an apartment.
This young man eventually left. I mean, it really traumatized him, and it really blew his budget because he was working, he was trying to make a new go of it, and this really screwed him over. He had to eat a lot of takeout that cost a lot of money, and so he moved out months ago. That unit is still empty, and the landlord is still collecting rent from the nonprofit. That's an empty unit,
It's the two big problems. When we talk about housing as a rights, and when we talk about tenants, tenants having rights and stuff like that, is the problem that a lot of social democrats, the Bernie Sanders of the world, the NDPs of the world, while it's great that they want to raise people's wages to keep up with the cost of living. So if you are a McDonald's worker, if you are a bartender, obviously, you want, your wages, and you don't want to depend on people tipping. You want your employer to pay, to pay you for your labor. But then so much of a person's personal income just goes into mortgages, or just goes to their rents. Rent is even more. Rents are just as expensive, if not more expensive, than a mortgage. Itself. And I just think so much of the left has, and liberals and so forth have just completely,
I've done the math.
At it. And they've allowed, the libertarian movement and and the market fundamentalists to monopolize housing. That housing should be for profit and stuff like that, and that's and of course, the false marketing that these landlords are small business owners. They're working class too, ergo they have the right to charge as much to keep with their, villas and whatnot. Correct?
They are making money hand over fist. My landlord, for instance, he filed since 2017. He's filed 55 eviction motions in this building alone. There's only 71 units here. And when he does evict people, he owns the moving company and the storage facility. So he, holds people's belongings for ransom. He evicted my friend 3 times from the same unit. And and she was a working person. And I think she was probably targeted because she was she is a very effective social worker, and a lot of neighbors would come to her for help. So that's a whole story unto itself. She's actually working on a documentary about this landlord. And so and again, to go back, none of this would be possible without a whole financial infrastructure of LLCs that permit people who are ambitious to take advantage of loopholes and socially murder people. I remember back in, I think it was between 2010 and 2011, or it might have been 2009 to 2010. We were without a elevator for about 3 months. And we have a 6-story building. We have a number of senior citizens who live on the top floor. In fact, our elevator's out right now. It was out for the last snowstorm, and it was out for this blizzard. And we've got folks in wheelchairs. We've got folks who are disabled. A neighbor, a dear young woman who had lived down the hall. This is years ago. Her mother had lived here. Her mother was murdered by her boyfriend. Her body was never discovered, and the daughter inherited the apartment. And beautiful young woman. She had 2 children. She wound up moving out to a much better situation because, she woke up one morning to find a rat, chewing at her daughter's little crib. But my point is, she had a miscarriage climbing those stairs, and she was a young woman, so the amount of violence that happens through a passive negligence is one of those terrible mysteries that it would take somebody like Oscar Wilde to really turn it into something comprehensible and into terms that anybody could understand. It would take like another.
Although Gandhi had some a lot of right-wing baggage, but apparently I don't know if it's true that he did say this. So don't quote me because it comes from the film. But he said that poverty is the worst form of violence, and So that's what's going through my mind hearing all of these again. Neo-Dickensian stories, and it's just wow.
It's important to remember too that it's not just passive violence. When it reaches the stage of an eviction is an explicit threat of actual violence, because an eviction is a statement that if you have not left the property by a certain date, the cops are going to forcibly remove you, up to the point of killing you if you resist. Cops are not killed in the line of duty a lot, but the most common situation in which cops are killed in the line of duty is serving eviction notices.
Wow.
Cops get in gunfights with people they're trying to throw out. If you do a search for eviction, police, killing, you will usually find something no older than 2 or 3 months old in the news at most.
Wow.
When I do a search today, I get a story from Vero Beach. 47-year-old Deputy Terry Sweeting Mashkow, a 25-year veteran of the agency, was killed in the line of duty serving a eviction notice. The person who was being thrown out wanted a place to live and decided to defend themselves from the cops trying to evict them. And they killed a deputy and were themselves wounded, and as of 3 months ago were in intensive care.
And this is why and this is why some leftists do support the Second Amendment, because if that tyrannical government is on your property and is going to evict you, you have the right to defend yourself against big bad evil governments.
Now, yes, I agree, but my point is that an eviction notice is a physical threat of violence, which is basically saying, you know, if you're not out after such and such a time, the gunfighters are going to come and move you by any means necessary.
Absolutely.
But hearing what Antonia was explaining to us, you know, all of those horrific stories of neo-Keynesianism and what you've just laid out, doesn't that show you? Because stuff like this, by the way, happens in places that do have single payer or a semi-single payer system, that do have some kind of a little bit of education where everybody gets fair-ish head start. What I'm trying to say is these kinds of stories can happen in places like Spain, Norway, Japan, South Korea, Britain, and so forth.
They don't have as many gunfights.
And I think what that shows you is that it's not enough that we get paid good wages. It's not enough that we have you know, free or subsidized education, and it's also not enough to just have a good job. Housing needs to be a right. It also cannot be a for-profit thing, and a lot of socialists, especially in the West, have fallen asleep on the wheel on this, which is why it's hard to argue with these pro real estate douchebags and these and these people who have marketed landlords as the working class and a small business person that also deserves a tax cuts and stuff like that.
If you look at all the people criticizing Zoran from the right, you'll find that they all are either affiliated with the cops or work for the real estate industry.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And that's why I really appreciated this rental ripoff hearing. I got to testify on Thursday, and it was a remarkable experience. And what's really stunning, it's not just speaking one's truth to power, because that's important, but it's also speaking truth to each other. You know, it's also like the people you meet who tell you about what's going on in their situation. And I've met some just amazing people through the HOPE program. One of the reasons why I love the HOPE program is that one of their goals is to end all evictions in Brooklyn. I mean, they're sort of hyper concentrated in Brooklyn. Their parent company is UHAB, the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board, which was founded in the 1970s.
Yes.
And their approach, have you heard of them, Chris?
I'm familiar with the urban homesteading movement, not specifically with this organization.
This particular organization has converted many buildings like ours into co-ops, but they'll only do it if they can finance it so that no one is displaced. That's their bottom line. You know, like good. Whether people are on Social Security or whether people have Section 8 or what have you, they will enter a situation similar to ours and convert a building like ours to co-op, but no one gets displaced. And I think that there's something so beautiful about that effort. and I'm just really happy to be part of the program. I've gotten more and more involved with their various outreach efforts. For instance, they have a number of classes, like once a month, Know Your Rights, a workshop, various topics, and everyone is welcome. You can either go in person or just tune in on Zoom. They don't turn anybody away, so long as you're not, long as you're not landlord. And they're training people, and they also have outreach right on the ground. They send volunteers out in the early mornings over at Housing Court, where you'll see these long lines every Monday morning, and they'll just go up to people and say, do you have representation? Do you know that you're entitled to representation? Do you know what your rights are? And just to try to keep as many people from being evicted as possible.
I have to ask. I have to ask you this question, which is, I cover a lot of Canadian topics, and I interviewed somebody who was running for mayor of a part of Ontario, and he was talking about and so they were talking to to me about the housing situation, the amount of homeless people that are in Canada, the astronomical mortgages people have to go through, the astronomical rents that people have to go through, and I know the Communist Party of Canada and my friend Yves Engler, who tried to run for leadership of the NTP, both him and his wife Bianca, in their political manifesto, they were advocating, as well as the Communist Party of Canada has advocated, what they call rent to gear income for both housing and apartments and stuff like that. So whatever, and I think it's whatever money you make from like your wages. They can't charge you above that. Ergo,
that's how subsidized federal rent control works in the U.S. The landlord says they're building a property. They say they want to make it affordable so that they can get federal money for it, and they are given a means testing system. Within that means testing system, everybody who makes less than the maximum and more than the minimum gets a rent that is based on their income that they should be able to afford, and people who make below the minimum or more than the maximum are completely locked out. Now, the problem with that, of course, is it means that homeless people and people who in a lot of sort of what I would call white collar working class jobs are being denied affordable housing because they make too little or too much money.
But would a good universal basic income to everybody, would that help on top of rent to gear income and so forth?
So anything regarding the short answer is sure, a universal basic income will help, but the long answer is you have to have so many guaranteed services in order to guarantee that a universal basic income will help, that you can't even really talk about the universal basic income until everybody has health care and guaranteed housing anyway, because otherwise the universal basic income is just paying for all those things.
And also, why not for the people? I have a friend of mine who's retired, and he's faced multiple housing situations, and he's had to move multiple times. A retired teacher, by the way. And what was I going to say? I mean,
it's so stressful to have to move.
Yes. I remember what I was going to say. He when I asked him, okay, you're unemployed right now, or you're retired right now. Don't you get some kind of like welfare or social security? And he says it still is not enough for me to live here, so he has to move multiple times. And I think and he says even when he was unemployed and he was job hunting, he said that in order to get any kind of welfare, you literally have to basically be in a destitution situation. But by then, you're homeless, more or less.
Yeah.
And once you're homeless, it's a dark world of people who
Oh, yes.
of people who just trample over you. I sometimes wonder what started first, the mental illness before the homelessness, or was it the homelessness that caused the mental illness?
So, well, first let's go ahead and start with the fact that saying that the homeless are all mentally ill is something that landlords say in order to get the cops to clear homeless people out of their neighborhoods so they can raise the rent.
Wow.
So the idea that all homeless people are mentally ill drug users is landlord propaganda more than the truth.
Yes, that is absolutely true, because most of these tech bros and lords of the universe are wigging out on ketamine, while they're working.
And they're having withdrawal symptoms from their ketamine, causing them to hallucinate that this guy on the street who's smoking a cigarette is smoking heroin on the street.
And if he was, so what?
Exactly.
I really do believe that this is an artifact of the puritanical.
That's the next thing. We should decriminalize drug use, and we should and I actually, it's not my biggest issue, but I actually read a really good article on a left-leaning website about why we should legalize public drinking, because criminalizing public drinking only punishes the working class and doesn't punish rich people who can drink at home.
But also, we have to learn from the mistakes of other countries. So Holland, for example, it's the consumption.
Your dad is Dutch, right? Your dad is Dutch.
Yeah, but here's the thing: it's widely believed that in Holland, pot and other drugs are legal. They're not. No. They are decriminalized. And the police
and
the police can't shoot down your coffee shop. But if a particular right-wing government, local or otherwise, is in power, they can close down your coffee shops, and they can, arrest you and so forth.
They can screw with your licenses in all sorts of ways.
So not only do we have to decriminalize all drug use, nonviolent or otherwise, but we also should legalize all drugs. You can give Big Pharma all of its opiates.
So I'm going to say this again. I'm going to say this again because my sex worker friends have really drilled this into me. It is very important to understand that when we're talking about legalization, we mean a regulatory scheme meant to profit capitalists at the expense of workers.
Yeah.
So, for example, when Belgium, I'm gonna call out your current the country currently sheltering you here.
Yeah.
When Belgium legalized prostitution, one of the things involved with the legalization of sex work was that sex workers had to work in a brothel, and a brothel is owned by someone. So, by legalizing sex work and requiring people to work in a brothel, you're then saying you cannot be an independent sex worker who goes into business for yourself and does safe in-call work. You must work for a boss in a brothel.
But in theory, you're supposed to have you're supposed to be allowed to form your own unions for collective bargaining.
Making
sure you're tested for STDs.
And in one of the first major legal battles between the brothel owners and the sex workers won a huge case that says every individual worker gets to decide which client they want to give their consent to. The brothel owner cannot make them service a particular customer against their consent, which sounds like an obvious thing, but brothel owners don't necessarily think that way, which this points to the problem with legalization. When the legalization scheme says you must work for a boss who takes the majority of your returns and pays you a wage.
Well, somebody in Black liberation media who is an advocate of pot legalization, ending the drug war, treating drugs as a addiction, abuse as. Anyways, he's for all the good stuff of why we advocate for like drug legalization, but he was warning in this racist capitalist system of ours, it's going to be subsidies for big weed.
Yes.
Industry. These often affluent white libertarians, in which this is just a hobby of theirs, while they do whatever dodgy stuff in Silicon Valley.
The good news
for Black people wanting to start their own businesses, they're going to go through all the hurdles of the police harassing them.
Now, I'm going to take one more step here. I'm going to take one more step here and make it even simpler. The individuals who have most benefited from legalization are celebrities who have been able to brand their weed.
Yeah,
Jim Belushi comes to mind. Cheech and Chong come to mind. John Kemp, formerly of the Seattle Supersonics, comes to mind. Snoop Dogg comes to mind. There are a lot of celebrities, especially celebrities who were associated with smoking weed in their comedy in the first place, going into the weed business. And one of the biggest, I hate to say this, it's like a betrayal when you really think about it, but one of the biggest beneficiaries of legal weed in the United States is the American family of the late Bob Marley. And they have become extremely successful weed capitalists here in the U.S.
Interesting.
Jim Belushi is an extremely successful.
And one of his sons is bizarrely a Zionist, which is weird. Yeah. But going back to the issue of housing, okay, so yes, we need rent-to-gear income. Yes, we need we need good-paying jobs that follow the basic rules that the more productive you are, the more you get paid, which keeps up with the cost of inflation, the cost of living. But you both think that even if you had all of that and a rent-to-gear income and a universal basic income and all of this neo-Keynesian crap of Clinton crime bills and so forth, we would still have a problem when it comes to people being housed living in their apartments and whatnot.
What is our attitude about private property in this world? Because you have to remember that the liberal system of rights includes the right to your property on its list. The French Declaration of the Rights of the Rights of Man says that men have the right to own their property. Now, keep in mind that these were the radical liberals who were chopping off the head of the nobility. But they still are saying, yeah, but the rich guy has the right to his property and you can't take your home from your landlord. Now, so the thing to remember is that while I agree with the manifest destiny and white supremacy as it comes to the fact that in the U.S., landlords are white and renters aren't very, very frequently, I also want to point out that there is this whole European idea of private property and the fact that you cannot take someone's property away from them and that they can do whatever they want with their property. That creates this whole problem of landlords, because the idea is I own a house. There's nothing that stops me from buying a second house. And if I own two houses, I can only live in one of them at one time. I can't live in both of them at the same time. So what happens is when I own that second house, I want to make money from it. I either want to sell it to someone else or I want to rent it out so that I can at least pay my property taxes on it. But now I own that house and I'm renting it out and you're living in the house I own. That gives me control over you. And this notion that private property is somehow this individual right that doesn't hurt anybody else has clearly been proven wrong by landlords.
Well, and but isn't it funny because you have in Canada and a small degree in the U.S. The land back movement of indigenous people and so forth, and you have many people, of course, who are hostile towards that. In Australia, when the late Bob Hawke, Labor Prime Minister, wanted to actually give Aboriginal people universal land rights, his friends in the mining company went on the attack and had propaganda videos that said, "Do you think these people who make up less than whatever percent of the population should control all of this land?"
Hey, why don't black farmers in the American South own their farms?
And so you have this thing of terror of the terror of the majority against the indigenous people, in which everybody's benefiting from their stolen land. But then on top of that, and this is the beauty of capitalism, and why when I asked Jared Ball, why can't black capitalism work, and he said, well, there's a lot of white communities and they have capitalism and they have inequality. So to say that to have a black version of that is not going to help us.
He's also been very realistic in noting that when you talk about black capitalism as the solution, you soon discover that there isn't enough black capital to support black capitalism. That much of black capital in America is supported by white capital and exploits black people.
Music industry is a perfect example of that.
Yes.
I mean, and I'm not even talking about Death Row Records, which was an entirely mobbed up racket, but something like Bad Boys or Arista Records is a subsidy. Def Jam is a subsidy of already big corporations, Sony, Warner, Universal. So,
well, I mean, it's like
so having a Russell Simmons, having a Diddy, even if Diddy didn't engage in so many atrocious exploitation, but that's not going to solve the plight of.
And let's note
who don't even have their own union for collective bargaining, unlike Hollywood's.
Let's also note that while we don't talk about Me Too so much anymore, that Russell Simmons is arguably as bad as Diddy.
Of course. I mean, it boils down to a question of, it boils down to me, it boils down to questions of accountability. Like you're mentioning a lot of very elite people who, for the most part, get a slap on the wrist, or they just excuse themselves, extradite themselves to Bali or wherever the heck that they have their second house, third house, fourth house, that they're not renting out. They just keep it spare, right? But what I do appreciate about this moment in history, and that is if we get to continue living, is that there seems to be a window open to hold landlords accountable, because when landlords prove themselves to be egregiously negligent or abusive, there have been cases where the property is either put into the hands of a retainer, or in the case of UHAB, tenants will take over and claim ownership of it themselves, and that's what we're working to. I'd also suggest that much of the disrepair issues, one of the committees that I'm involved in Hope is a task force, and once a month we meet with the Brooklyn Borough President's office to discuss issues in our buildings, and also meet with officials from HPD, Department of Buildings, and other institutions that are supposed to be maintaining these properties. They're the city agencies and the state agencies that are supposed to be overseeing the standards. You know, I think that we're at a point where there's going to be a great potential for another. You were mentioning the New Deal, Chris, before. There's a real potential for a works project or a New Deal here in New York, where there could be a massive employment wave.
I saw the shoveling snow. The shoveling snow thing that had everybody out in the street shoveling snow for a piece of the money, and I just laughed seeing that. This makes sense. This makes so much more sense than so many of the silly things we do instead.
Absolutely. Like, there's this blog that I really love called Money on the Left, and they talk extensively about democratic public finance, about the idea that any institution can issue its own currency, and the thought of that is just so liberating. They've written beautiful articles that they've pitched to Mayor Mamdani to help Trump-proof New York, and one of the hopes that I have is for a municipal effort to upgrade all of our electricity, especially in our older buildings, because due to old statutes, the electrical infrastructure of older buildings only need to meet the standards of the year that the building was built. So, for instance, our building was built in 1929. That was long before air conditioners, long before space heaters and other kinds of equipment that take up a lot of electricity. And
I imagine that because I've read, now I'm going to use some technical jargon from my old job. New York has an electrical code that is referred to by the acronym ASHRAE, specifically for New York City, that says what the minimum acceptable standards for your electrical system are.
I know this how do you spell that?
ASHRAE. And ASHRAE is one of the most progressive energy requirements in the country, as far as efficiency and all this and preventing global warming, etc. But you think about what Tony's saying about the exception. If the building was built in 1929, ASHRAE doesn't apply. The 1929 code is all they have to meet. Now, if I'm building a new building in Manhattan, I have to meet ASHRAE. If I'm taking over an older building, Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, anywhere there still might be an older building. I'm sure I'm exaggerating a little. There might be no old buildings left in New York, except historic landmarks. But anywhere there might still be an old building, ASHRAE doesn't apply. Whatever archaic code was on the books when that building was built applies.
This has this kind of initiative of bringing everybody up to ASHRAE standards. That would be a tremendous boon to employment here in New York. It would also increase everyone's safety. Another suggestion that I brought up in the various task forces that I'm involved with pertain to localizing our maintenance crews, which is to say, if you're a repair person employed by HPD or by DHCR or what have you, you might live all the way in the Bronx and have to go all the way to Staten Island for an assignment. And my feeling is that if you're repairing boilers, if you're repairing windows, if you're repairing what have you, and you're assigned to your own zip code, there grows a sense of pride and neighborhood responsibility there, because it's like, these are my neighbors and I'm making sure that they're safe and that they have what they need. And it would also be really good for workers because, who wants a long commute?
And think about it too, just from a basic logistics mind. If you're a private landlord hiring a super, it makes more sense for you to hire a super on or close to the property.
That's actually law. If you have
Yeah.
more than, I believe, 8 units, the super has to live within a certain distance, and supers are not supposed to be assigned more than, I think, I don't have this number memorized, but I think it's like something like 45 units or something like
So
that.
if you look at you look at the way we're handicapping the public attempt to meet the housing needs so that it doesn't overly compete with the private market.
Right.
Now, keep in mind that it's the competition with public housing that brings rents down.
But hearing all of this though, but this is why I come to the conclusion that while we do need to pay everybody a good living wage, and I do believe in a strong, robust, universal basic income and welfare, and so forth. But it sounds to me as if even if we have all of that, we and national and the nationalization of major industry, all of that doesn't matter. We have to get rid of just the idea of a for-profit
there's a
industry
meme.
and the whole concept of
There's a meme.
private property, etc.
I'm sure it'll be on Blue Sky eventually. I've seen it on Twitter for years. There's a meme that says, "What do you think we meant when we said seize the means of production?" Because we can't just talk about stuff like universal health care and universal basic income in the long run. In the long run, we have to talk about changing this whole private property thing so that owning a second house doesn't give me the right to have someone killed. I mean, when we're talking about this whole landlord tenant thing, in the end, we're talking about archaic law that goes back to the Middle Ages that says, if I have a second house, I can kill the person living in it if I want to.
But it's worse than that because, going back to 2008, the housing bubble, the subprime mortgage bubble that took place in the U.S. and the U.K. and brought the economy crashing. Those con artists, those swindlers, those mobsters, those banksters were deliberately giving people who should not have had those second houses, deliberately were giving them here. You can have a second house. You can have a third house. Oh, we're all middle class now.
Also, and I think this also cuts back to the fact that landlords are so unpopular now too. But
when were they popular?
What is that?
When were they popular?
You can raise a question about that, but I would certainly say they were more popular before the least popular president of the United States ever was a corrupt landlord.
It was his father.
Yes.
It was his father's housing discrimination that brought about the legislation in, I believe, 1968. What good has that really done?
Marvel Comics created a bad guy based on Fred Trump in the Avengers in the late 60s, early 70s.
What was the character?
Cornelius Van Lunt.
Oh, wow.
My friend Joe Emmelsberger, brilliant Marxist media critic, NGO critic, and anti-imperialist campaigner, he says that in the end of the day, there is no such thing as what capitalists call a free market. You need a government for contracts. You need a government that's the whole thing. You need a government to make these rules. And again, from Elon Musk to NASA itself, to Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Donald Trump himself, none of them were self-made millionaires that pulled themselves by the bootstrap. They all needed government contracts or somebody in government or a crony in government to help them build their business.
Bill Gates comes the closest, but even he was greatly helped by the fact that his mom was a secretary at Microsoft, not at Microsoft, at a company preceding Microsoft, who became a millionaire when the company made lots of money. And that certainly certainly didn't hurt. And nobody remembers that. His mom was this personal secretary to some CEO somewhere who became a millionaire when the stock paid off.
Nobody makes it alone. And I like to talk about the bootstrap mind virus, which the bootstrap mind virus, unfortunately, is really widespread, and it prevents and it circumvents solidarity. It leads people to become cynical about unionization efforts. It leads people to think that they are somehow there's that siren. Is that Brooklyn siren? It leads people to think that they are somehow supernaturally able to navigate really complex situations or violent situations and come out ahead. I remember I remember somebody once saying, well, the landlord can't harass me because I have this background and we know how to handle things. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, let's define what harassment is. So
I mean, I guess if you're mobbed up enough, the landlord can't harass you because the harassment that you unleash on them will be worse, but that's not necessarily a normal circumstance.
Right. That is actually you're in solidarity with your blood brothers in the mafia or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like people thinking that they can they can sole actors in their own defense, and it's an unfortunate meritocracy myth.
Mm-hmm.
But the Donald Trumps of the world and the people who work in real estate, assuming they're not involved in any kind of dodgy stuff.
So I'm going to stop you right there.
I mean, what would you say to those folks who would argue that we build the best houses from the private industry, and it's you, the liberals, it's you, the socialists, who have overburdened us with too much regulation. That's why we really have a housing crisis. Sure, you can give people like whatever, like their wages and so forth, but we need more. We need to have the freedom to build more and more and more housing. Subsidize us for that, and we'll charge people later and all that stuff. So, what would you say to the Donald Trumps and the other people in the real estate industry who say that it's our insistence that everything be regulated why we have a housing crisis? And again, they would say that they have the right to charge however much they want because they built the houses, they built the apartments and whatnot.
Well, there's some people who I will never get through to. But what I would say is I would point to my friend Arturo Farrell, the multiple Grammy award-winning musician who founded the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance, which has evolved into the organization known as Bilongo. And just this past week, they broke ground in Spanish Harlem. They're going to be building a beautiful multi-use structure. Mayor Mamdani was there, and my friend Arturo actually composed a mambo in honor of Mamdani. I believe it's called the Mamdani Mambo for Bilongo, or it's a beautiful piece of music. And the thing is that this housing structure will also contain culture institutions. So we're going to have people who are formerly unhoused to get their own apartments. We're also going to have people middle income structure living here. I believe it's going to be 9 stories high. It's going to take up most of the city block, I believe. And there's going to be a theater for music. There's going to be practice rooms for kids. They've already taught thousands of kids around New York music and given out free instruments. And it's a really beautiful program. And it's lifted to this place where they just broke ground, and they're going to have this gorgeous state-of-the-art place where formerly unhoused people are going to be living with quote-unquote middle-class people in a in a culture center. They're calling it Timbale Terrace. I think that might be sort of a nod to the Warner Brothers Termite Terrace, which is where they did the Warner Brothers cartoons. But this is Timbale Terrace, and Arturo's coming from a legacy of giftedness. His father, Chico O'Farrell, they named a street after him in Cuba. And the first they named a birdland down there after his father Chico, and now he is breaking ground on this beautiful structure, and his two sons are carrying on the traditions. Zach and Adam are both involved in the arts, education, award-winning musicians themselves. One of their programs is the Fat Cats, where they get teenage kids together and teach them, their first professional gigs of jazz. And, I'd say, there's no getting to people. I don't think that, I'd love to think that you keep mentioning the term Dickensian, Youri. I mean, one of my favorite books is A Christmas Carol. And the idea that one night of intense hallucinations can change a person, maybe that's true, but I'm not going to count on it. And I'm just going to look to the people who are building, beautiful new possibilities, even at this point in history where a lot of people just want to roll over and play dead and sleep. This is the time we really need to wake up and connect with our neighbors.
Well, let me ask. Let me ask you this question. This is one this is a question I especially prepared, which is I wanted to know your views on Mamdani. Do you like so many other leftists have been going through Mamdani mania? Why or why not? And how do you assess his time in office so far, just when it comes to the issue of housing, rent control, rent-to-gear income, and trying to make housing more of a right as opposed to a privilege? Very curious your response on that.
I think if anyone is equipped to have a Christmas Carol Dickensian effect on the minds of the populace, it would be a person like Zoran Mamdani, who has extraordinary gifts beyond what actually, I think beyond any elected official that I've seen in my lifetime, in that he has a great capacity for communication in all forms. He was a wonderful hip hop artist. I don't know if you guys ever caught his song Nani, but it's homage to his grandmother. And I am personally very moved by that music video, which he directed, because it begins with a scene of elder abuse in a common New York kitchen. And it's subtle. It's not overt elder abuse. It's just, it's a kind of elder abuse that you recognize if you're tuned to recognizing it. It's just diminishing a grandmother and telling her that her opinion is not important. And then she goes into this rap about how badass she is. And I didn't know that he was a hip hop artist before he ran. I mean, it wasn't, and I only caught up.
That's news to me as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I knew it because Cuomo was really going out of his way to label him as a rapper in a way that made it sound as if he was completely unsuitable to be mayor of New York.
But I thought we liked hip hop mayors. KRS once said that Eric Adams was the hip hop mayor, and Lauren DJ Effin on Drink Champs invited Eric Adams and gave him the red carpet treatment. So I thought we were supposed to like hip hop mayors.
Well, the thing is that I hated Eric Adams.
Adams was a cop.
I hated him beginning to end, and I was so grateful for Ole Oloreen Esquire, the public defender who took him to task on the Breakfast Club. I thought she was just phenomenal taking him down. And she also took down Cuomo too, really effectively on her channel. And the thing is that Zoran Mamdani was the assistant director on a Disney production, an excellent Disney production about a chess champion in.
Oh, I've seen that movie. Good movie. Very good movie.
And being an assistant director takes a lot of finesse, almost as much finesse as being a director,
Well, more, because you have to do real work.
and being that he comes from this place where his father was this anti-colonial scholar and that his mother did these amazing movies, he has a really unusual 21st century background. And also another thing that I believe works in his favor tremendously is that he is an immigrant, because he can never be accused of having presidential aspirations. It's that there's only so high he can go. And so he's there. I believe that the second most important elected office in the country after POTUS is the mayor of New York. I'm very chauvinistic about my city. I think that my city is a real standard for global plurality.
Just in a basic logistical way of looking at it, it's important to remember that New York and Los Angeles are bigger than some states when it comes to population. So when we're talking about people like the mayors of New York and the mayor of Los Angeles, we're talking about people who are significantly more powerful than the government of Vermont or Rhode Island.
Well, and I sometimes joke that if the U.S. goes into not so much a civil war, but if some states want to secede from the U.S. because they're tired of the neo-Confederate movement that is the Republican Party, New York, if it wanted to secede and be its own country, would make it out alive. California, if California was its own country and seceded, it would make it out alive. So would D.C. and so forth. But
didn't you just hear what I said about New York being where the neo-Confederate movement is headquartered, and that New York being pro-Confederate during the Civil War?
But Chris, but this is a lot like,
Fox News.
Point. Well, no,
Fox News is headquartered in New York, not Miami.
Exactly. No, and you are very right about that. But when it comes to election time, unfortunately, people don't vote for the Green Party and PSL, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. But people still choose to vote for the Democrats. I mean, Donald Trump won the primaries in New York, rallying people. Do you remember during the debates when Ted Cruz talked about New York values for no good?
He got
won the primary in New York, but he didn't win New York when it came to the general election. So
he got Andrew Cuomo to run against the Democrats for him as a MAGA candidate. I mean,
he absolutely did. And that is another reason why I really think that we are looking at a portal here. It's not that Zohran Mamdani is a magician, but I do think that he brings out the magician in everybody. I do think that he is going to command a lot more volunteerism and a lot more organizing as his administration unfolds. I think that he started off very, very strong. I think that a lot of the criticism that he's come up against is not of particular I do think that he needs to make concessions, but that he's moving in a direction of equity and revolution. And I think he's
my strongest criticism is he really should fire the police commissioner.
But you realize he demoted her, right?
I know.
Right? And I think that symbolic step is really important, because you don't want to destroy your enemies. You want to corral them, right? Because destroying them martyrs them. You don't want to martyr people. You want to corral them and by demoting her in this way, he's sending a message that the police will have to jump through the NYPD will have to step up and jump through more hoops as far as answering their critics.
I think when it comes to Mamdani, I definitely did not have Mamdani mania. My friend Karina Paez of Anti-Conquista, Latin American leftist social media outlet. She hates like a Mamdani and has been arguing with the people constantly about how, like that comparing him critically to Bernie and AOC or AO. Well, I'll just say the following about Mamdani. If people wanted to vote for Mamdani because they thought that he was going to make some good gains for the working class, okay, I can understand that. I can totally understand that, especially if he openly calls himself a socialist and aligns himself with the Bernie Sanders faction of the Democratic Party. So if people wanted to vote for Mamdani because they really think he's going to make the cost of living better and so forth, I completely understand that. What I did not like about a lot of the people who went through Mamdani mania was when he would be a coward in the face of Zionists and stuff like that. People kept making excuses for him, and it's like, guys, look. He's not going to, he's not going to be on the front line of anti-imperialism. He's the mayor of New York. At best, he will try to make good, small gains, which will be very meaningful for the vast working class people in work poverty. But don't expect this guy to be, anything like Jeremy Corbyn. And on top of that, Jeremy Corbyn has been the coward.
Jeremy Corbyn isn't really Jeremy Corbyn. The same way Bernie Sanders isn't really Bernie Sanders. That's a whole another argument for a whole nother show.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether or not Mamdani can possibly live up to everything he said is another argument for another show. I will say, watching housing and the people astroturfing housing movements around the country, it is a tremendously good thing that Andrew Cuomo didn't win the presidency or that Eric Adams wasn't reelected. Those things matter a lot. If you look at what's happening in San Francisco, the mayor of San Francisco, a quote-unquote Democrat named Daniel Lurie, is essentially a MAGA mayor despite being a Democrat. If you look at Gavin Newsom as governor of California, he's practically MAGA despite being a Democrat. So all the criticisms that you can possibly make, it's better that Mamdani won than some of the other people who have won. Would I have liked it if PSL had made a decision to run a really good candidate? Yes. But I understand why they're saying we want people to vote for the right thing. We want this guy to win, and we want to be able to criticize him if he doesn't live up to his promises.
But what was
lovely though is that the first weekend of his tenure, he went up to the Bronx, to the home of hip hop, and he had a press conference, and he had some of the most hardcore housing organizers speak, And one of the people who spoke was a gentleman named Fitzroy. Fitzroy is with a nonprofit called CASA, which is in the Bronx. And he said, Mayor, we're going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
If you don't come through, we're going to hold your feet to the fire. And I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We're at this place where we know that things are about to explode on a global level, and they're already exploding here.
Yeah.
We know that organizing and putting pressure on this wonderful new mayor is a path forward. And, in order to live, I have to have things to hang on to be hopeful about.
And you just
hanging on to.
You just put it exactly right. When our guys win, we put pressure on them to keep their promises. We don't bend over and make apologies for everything they do and say. We put pressure on them. That's supposed to be the difference. And yes, if we can maintain the pressure, I believe that we can make people live up to at least some of their promises simply by maintaining that pressure. In the long run, the New Deal did not happen because FDR was such a democratic socialist. Exactly. The New Deal happened because social movements didn't really give FDR a choice. He had to do something.
That's right.
And there were still lots of Democrats that did not want FDR to even do all the stuff that was the New Deal. Hence why he was forced to have Harry Truman. And on top of that, there was an attempted fascist coup against FDR. And I always wonder if that's the reason why there wasn't more revolutionary policies that was advanced.
The thing to always remember. Since we went there, I will say that part of the problem is that one of FDR's closest advisors was also one of the ringleaders of the coup against him. Let me do a quick look because I want to make sure I get the name right. I never remember the name of the one investment agency right without looking at it.
Mm-hmm. But on top, while you're searching for that, I'll also say now, Antonia, so Puerto Rican background, correct?
Puerto Rican and Dominican. My mom was born in the Dominican Republic. The dad was born in Puerto Rico, so I'm a Dominican.
Okay. So that's incredible. So that said. Do we need more? And New York is definitely capable of doing it since so many great protests and so many great anti-imperialist and social justice wars are in New York. Do we need to go back into the kind of militancy of the young lords when it comes to making housing a right, giving people single-payer health care and whatnot? And
I think that the Black Panthers and the Young Lords are great templates for organizing, feeding people, educating people, connecting people to what they need, legal help, medical help, hyper local clinics. I think that these are tried and true empowerment plans, and I think that is the future. Yeah.
Well, if we actually want to quote seize the means of production, you have to have alternatives to the systems built up by the state. And so mutual aid and community defense.
I'm curious when it comes to when it comes to Puerto Rico. Do you think in our lifetime? So say I live until I'm 67 or something like that. Will we see an independent Puerto Rico in our lifetime, and other U.S. Territories, colonies, all be given their independence, or it's going to take longer than that?
It won't be given.
It will have to be taken or won. Yes.
Yeah, and it's not my direct battle. My battle is so much more tiny and local, but it is certainly of my concern as to what my extended family. I mean, most of my family moved here, the family that I'm in touch with.
Yeah.
But when I think of the greater family of humanity, I very much identify with my Puerto Rican roots, and I very much resent how the colony has been treated ever since it became a colony. One of the forced sterilization of the poor, of women, the appropriation of all the power structures. it's of great concern, and I was most impressed with, I'm not really into the new music that the kids are into. I listen to a lot of old stuff. I'm a Bach person myself, but I also like hip hop a lot. I mean, I'm pretty much, the genres are all over the place. And so what Bad Bunny did for that halftime show, I thought was a beautiful spectacle that ought to inspire a sense of Pan-Americanism. And I was grateful that it was all in Spanish as well. Well, most of it was in Spanish. I thought that was phenomenal.
Well,
And
I was. I've been listening to some of the like Latin hip hop reggaeton, and I was planning on getting the album he did with J Balvin, and then when I heard that Bad Bunny was doing an entire concept album about how awful it is for Puerto Rico to be a colony and how he advocates Puerto Rican independence, I said to myself, okay, I definitely have to get this album. So
have you enjoyed it?
I haven't gotten it yet. I haven't gotten it yet, but I will say, but I wonder, speaking of, decolonization and stuff, and we talked about Manifest Destiny in the beginning. What do you think it's going to take for the broad people power movement in the U.S.? It could be Black Lives Matter. It could be the environmentalist movement. It could be the Latin American left movement, the broad workers movement. What do you think it's going to take for all of those groups, including the anti-imperialist movement, to show more urgent solidarity to Native Americans, Indigenous Hawaiians, and Indigenous Alaskans? Because that battle still has not been advanced, that we address their plight and give them the urgent solidarity that they deserve.
We're still trying to get Bill Clinton to admit women are human.
or to define what is means.
Yeah.
I would say that I think our hope is in each other and in art. I believe that art can inspire people to just keep going, and sometimes just keeping on is what will take us to where we need to go as a species. I think that stories, telling each other our stories, will foment more solidarity. I think that shows like this that Chris has been doing so faithfully for so long helps build solidarity, helps build bridges between people who might not otherwise identify with each other. I think that music is probably the most basic way of triggering those emotions that bring people together.
The two things that everybody I have ever spoken to is into in some form or another, one or the other, always, sometimes both, but always one or the other, is music and sports. Not everybody's a sports person and not everybody's a music person, but most people are one or the other. And there's lots of ways that music and sports can open people up to other conversations. And what's great is that there's also lots of ways that music and sports just run naturally to discussions of taking our power back from the landlord and the boss. Because athletes are fighting the boss every time it comes time to renegotiate a contract.
These people are our 21st century indentured servants.
Everybody talks.
I'll be back in 2 minutes. Hold on.
Everybody talks about the millions of dollars that the highest paid athletes make, but nobody really talks about the minimum pay and how short a career lasts.
Although the U.S. has not gotten to the level Canada is at when it comes to recognizing the plight of Native Americans and doing land acknowledgement and so forth, although Australia has not even gotten to the level the U.S. is, where they still engage in genocide denialism, and they're nowhere near where New Zealand is at. I think straight.
But is it really?
Well, I'll say
is
this.
It really progressive for a white team called the All Blacks to do all those hakas before the rugby games?
Don't even get me started on how fucking fed up I am that the haka is used for fucking everything and anything. But I will say this: stranger things can happen.
Oh, sure.
I never thought in my lifetime. I never would have thought so if I died tomorrow, I would have never thought in my lifetime that Canada, the left, would show the urgent solidarity it does to Indigenous people. I never thought in my lifetime people are now talking about mental health, and you have campaigns like the MTV one that says mental health is health, and political parties are now talking about how mental health care should be part of a single payer system, and people who abused people and weaponized their mental health stuff would be canceled, like the wrath of that was unleashed on Justin Timberlake and Diane Sawyer for the way they treated Britney Spears. So who knows? Maybe the Indigenous liberation movement of Australia, the United States, the Sami and the Roma people will get to the level it's at when we talk about the rights of undocumented people, Black Lives Matter, queer liberation, and
we keep pushing for it. We'll get there.
I do think that it's on a certain level, I sympathize with people who choose Scientology because they feel like they've been hurt by psychiatry. Some people choose Scientology because they feel that psychiatry has done them wrong, and I can see why. Because, the state can wield psychiatric labels to dehumanize people and take their rights away.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning I think I put this in the comments on Instagram the other day, who's mentally well now other than people who are living off the immiseration of the masses that every anxiety is tranquilized. Well, you've got to have a really elite space to be.
But is it really mentally healthy? Is it really mentally healthy to be a capitalist super predator? Not that I'm trying to be sympathetic to them, but is that really mentally healthy, or does that
live a long fucking time, don't they? They live a long time.
They kill a lot of other people in the process of living long.
So that makes them healthy, right? I mean, how do we define health? Are we going to define health by what metric? So that's where. Yeah.
Well, in response to that, Antonia, I would say the following. I would say, I definitely agree with you that psychiatry, like big pharma, there's lots of legitimate criticisms one can make, but we should not have a reactionary response, which is Scientology or the people who were COVID minimalists and denialists.
If we're going to talk about reactionary responses to big pharma, I was last week. I revisited a show from 2022, 2023, where a colleague of mine, Renee Johnston from Black Liberation Media, and I were talking about what was then a big deal, the Rage Against the War Machine protest in DC. We still don't know to this day how much money they raised or where it went, but I'm willing to bet a lot of it went to RFK Jr.'s presidential run.
Yeah, definitely.
Because Nick Brana from the Movement for a People's Party ended up working on the RFK Jr. campaign. For all I know, he has a job in the Trump Department of Health and Human Services now.
He probably works under Tulsi Gabbard. Remember Tulsi Gabbard? By the way, I cannot apologize enough to Abby Martin and her husband because
everybody who trashed
because they were saying Tulsi, you may like a lot of her positions, but she is a far right closet.
she was
Look,
pointing out
they've been vindicated. They've been vindicated, and I was wrong. So
Abby Martin was pointing out from the beginning that Tulsi Gabbard grew up in an anti-gay cult and was taking lots and lots of money from the people who are essentially the American fundraising department for Narendra Modi.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, that said, I would like to ask Tony if you have any final thoughts before we wrap up, since we've gone about 2 hours and have gotten a little off topic.
Yeah, I would want to say that to anybody who's a tenant who is observing that their landlord is not treating them or their neighbors well, that there are resources for you, especially in New York. And everybody in New York is welcome to come to Hope meetings, which are held on Zoom and in person. So you don't even have to be there in person, and you can learn about your rights, and that you're not alone, and that lift your head. We're here. We got your back. And, it's going to be a long struggle, but we're going to dance and we're going to sing and we're going to have some empanadas along the way. So join us. That's my final thoughts.
I think that's great. I think everybody should look into whether there's a tenants union in their building that they can join, and look into what they can do to start one if there's not. I mean, that's one of the best places that anybody can start with their organizing, right in your apartment building.
That's
and
right.
More people rent and sell.
You never know how amazing your neighbors are until you get to know them.
It's true.
And, for all of the anti-Americanism that a lot of the smug European left and the pseudo-left practices, in the end of the day, when a war goes on, or when there is epic injustices, there is large demonstrations, and it's always in New York, D.C., Chicago, California, and so forth. And I'm always in Belgium. Wow. I can only dream of trying to get people to be protesting against so many of the injustices of the world. And we do have a lot of anti-racism and xenophobia and whatnot.
Americans are still really salty we didn't have yellow vest riots in 2020, though. So there's jealousy both ways.
Exactly. But we need to learn from each other, and the kind of actions that Antonia was talking about. I mean, in Spain, which got one of the worst end of the sticks when we talk about the 2008 financial crash, there were people doing the exact same things that Antonia was talking about, where when people were being evicted, neighbors and entire peoples would block the police, would try to sabotage it, would say to them, "Come stay at my place." So
they've
people power, breaking through power is easier than we think, as Ralph
in
says.
India, they've been keeping Narendra Modi on some kind of leash with general strikes. The political opposition to Modi is pathetic and sad and disorganized, but the people-powered opposition to Modi is enough to have a general strike whenever he starts to get too stupid.
My smarter half, my husband over here, just handed me a note that I'm going to read to you folks because it's very, very pertinent. Yeah. Wealthy people have HOAs. Middle class people have co-op boards. Renters, we have tenant unions.
Yes.
Organizing is for everyone.
Yes. And honestly, if you're in an HOA, you should be doing more to take on the ruling class of your HOA, because they're screwing folks.
And this, my friends, is why Ted Cruz really does not like New York values. And Donald Trump and win a primary.
And with all people if all people will forgive me for my jingoistic moment, your father supported Batista. Fuck you, Ted. Now, on that note, my final thought is that I'm really thankful people joined us today. I always love it when we have comments in the chat and folks watching the show. So I want to thank everybody who did. I want to thank both Youri and Antonia for being able to join me today, because it's been a great conversation. I hope you guys have enjoyed it too.
Absolutely.
And now comes the part where I ask everybody for money. I apologize in advance. If you really can't afford it, please go ahead and end the stream right now. But if you can, please visit the Patreon site you see on in my little window here. If you can, please subscribe. I appreciate it, Tony, very much, actually.
And it's money well, and remember, it's money better well spent than your multiple overpriced streaming services. And remember, guys, New York values.
If you've been
free Palestine and hats off Iran in the world.
If you were giving money to Jimmy Dore and you were giving money to TYT and you're embarrassed about it now, keep in mind that I was criticizing them when people still like them. And I'm still here, still being consistent. You can give me your money instead of TYT or Jimmy Dore, and I promise to stay consistent.
Wepa.
And on that note, I want to thank everybody again who joined us. I will be back next week with Youri again, as it happens. The two of us will be doing the show. And then Youri and Renee and I will have a special show on Wednesday, the 18th, to talk about the late Jesse Jackson.
Oh, wow.
On that note, until next week, I hope everybody continues to pay attention to their local independent media, continues to follow me, and between now and next week, we'll tweet at you. Everybody take care.
Thank you. Bye.